I wanted to ask about, the starting point of innovation. Because, I was discussing earlier and, in terms of what's happening in the ESG sustainability world, as you mentioned and alluded to, it's been politicized. And the question is this the right moment to then focus on the real impact of innovation? So what we've seen is, a lot of companies started with the low hanging fruits. A lot of companies so focused on reporting, and a lot hasn't been done in terms of research. Of course, some of the big companies are doing that, but a lot of companies haven't done so much in terms of, you know, seeing it as an opportunity. It's been more, what are the low hanging fruits? What are the quick tick boxes? So the question is, what is the starting point for innovation? And what would you be saying to companies to do differently?
Well, great question. And I think, ESG is a framework for tracking, using metrics to track and report on environmental, social, and governance. Right. So you would have a composite score, so to speak. And then this is theoretically a way to signal, to the world, to investors, the types of things that are you doing, positively speaking. Um, and really, it's large companies that have the resources to get into that level of minutia and detail to track and build those reports because a lot of these types of reporting, is much more complicated and difficult from a resourcing point of view if you're a small to medium sized business. So I would start by saying it also depends on what scale and what size and context, right? The company is approaching innovation. And, what I find quite interesting, despite, whether or not there's the ESG is a trend that's going to continue, or maybe it's going to evolve into a different set of standards, et cetera. What I find very interesting when I talk to large scale private sector companies, particularly that have a materials, anchor to their supply chain. So, because some large companies, it's digital, for example. Um, but when you thinking about those, for example, in let's say food and agriculture, large scale companies that need to source, and they know that touches, farmers, meaning there's a social element to be considering, not just in your own company, but when you're thinking around the different scopes of where your impact is. So you have that social element, of course. Food and ag is very much connected to climate and environments. So there's all kinds of ways that there's metrics to be measured. And then I'm maybe less emphasizing governance here for the innovation angle. But, doing business the right way is to secure and, let's say, future proof, not to over use a word that's kind of, again, maybe sometimes a very commercial way of putting things. It's just smart business. Whether or not they're doing ESG, there's many companies that I've been interacting with in the past half year, even. They're still very much going to do the right things right, and that's what their intent is, despite whether or not there's the pressure from the ESG side. So when it comes down to innovation, what I'm noticing is there's a lot of um, different ways of thinking around financing. So even there's innovative finance, but there's also on the material side different ways of securing your supply chain so that it can be more sustainable. Because there is that demand in many cases. Consumers do want to source from those that they know are also, not having children child labor in the supply chain. It's not in sourcing food, so to speak, or from areas that are deforested because of that. So these are the kinds of things that, again, companies that are large enough to even do ESG tracking and metrics, create their own dashboards authentically want to be working in a very innovative way so that the impact is there, and that it's also, financially strategic as well. So you're doing things in a way that's going to make the costs of doing business affordable. So your question was really, a broad one. So I was trying to give some, precise examples, but also some considerations, like when we do think around, innovation. Again, like what's the specific application of it? It's endless, and I find it to be also really exciting to see companies in the private sector in particular step up and do things, well and right despite what's the next trend or pressure, so to speak, coming from investors or government.